The Voxari child killer's brain matter splattered on the wall behind him as the human issued high-powered hollow-point bullet shattered his skull into 1,000,000 pieces and turned his head to mush. The other Voxari in the room immediately fell to their knees, begging the vengeful humans for forgiveness. They knew that the murder of little Timmy would mean unimaginable hell for their entire planet if they did not win back humanity's mercy after this unforgivable atrocity. It had been 3 days since the tragic accident at the Voxari spaceport customs checkpoint. Jerry Griffin, Earth's most grizzled and battle-hardened diplomat, had been urgently summoned from his early retirement to the alien homeworld to deal with the crisis. The message from the Voxari High Chancellor was grave. A human boy, no more than 8 years old, had been killed by a panicking security guard. The fool had no idea that a neural disruptor would liquefy a human child's brain. Griffin clenched his fists as his shuttle touched down, bile rising in his throat. He wanted to turn the cursed planet to glass then and there, but he had a job to do first. The Voxari would pay dearly for this insult. As he strode down the ramp, he was greeted by a visibly distressed Vortis, the High Chancellor. "Please, I beg of you, the guard did not know he—" Vortis stammered before being cut off. "Shut up and bring me to the kid," Griffin spat, struggling to keep his voice level. "I need to see what your savage did." In the morgue, Griffin froze as he saw the small body on the cold metal table. Timmy. In the boy's stiff hand was clutched a battered stuffed rabbit. Griffin would know that toy anywhere. Choking back sudden hot tears, his mind reeled back to 5 years prior, to his own son, pale and gaunt in a hospital bed, smiling weakly as he held the same stuffed animal, right until the moment the cancer finally claimed him. Griffin had donated the toy afterwards, and now seeing it again here like this, his blood turned to ice as his hands curled into trembling fists. He turned to Vortis, his voice a dangerous whisper. "There is going to be hell to pay for this. I will rain fire and death upon your planet, the likes of which you cannot fathom. I will break you and your entire species for what you have done." Griffin stormed into the Voxari High Council chamber, seething with barely contained rage. He slammed a fist down on the intricately carved wood table, causing the alien dignitaries to flinch. "I demand a full investigation into the murder of that human boy Timmy, and I want the savage who killed him extradited to Earth immediately to face justice under human law." Griffin roared, his eyes blazing. High Chancellor Vortis stood, holding up his hands in a placating gesture, clearly taken aback by the human's aggressive demeanor. "Please, Ambassador Griffin, I understand your anger, but the guard was following Voxari customs protocol. He cannot be subject to human laws." Griffin's face reddened as he jabbed a finger at Vortis. "Bullshit. Human lives are not subject to your barbaric laws. The Terran Alliance will cut off all diplomatic ties and impose crippling sanctions unless my demands are met. We'll bring your economy to its knees." The Voxari diplomats murmured anxiously amongst themselves. Vortis's shoulders slumped, realizing the precariousness of the situation. "Perhaps a compromise, then," he offered weakly. "A joint investigation with both human and Voxari representatives, and a trial here but with a human legal advisor present, please. We cannot risk losing our relationship with Earth." Griffin narrowed his eyes but gave a curt nod. "Fine, it's a start, but know this. I won't rest until that boy and my own son get the justice they deserve. This is only the beginning." As Griffin turned on his heel to leave, he overheard hushed whispers from 2 Voxari in the corner. "It's all going to plan. The humans will never know that this was all orchestrated to drive them away." Griffin froze, a chill running down his spine as he processed the sinister implications. This went far deeper than he ever could have imagined. Griffin couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister was at play. He stormed back into Vortis's office, slamming the door behind him. "You're going to tell me everything you know about this true Vox group, and you're going to do it now," Griffin growled, his eyes boring into the High Chancellor. Vortis shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze darting around the room. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. Griffin leaned in close, his face inches from Vortis's. "Don't bullshit me, I heard your people talking, now spill it." Vortis sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "There have been rumors of a faction within our government that opposes any cooperation with humans. They call themselves the True Vox. I want every scrap of intelligence you have on them. Now," Griffin demanded. "I can't just hand over classified information like that," Vortis protested. Griffin's eyes narrowed. "Either you give me what I want, or I leak the details of Timmy's death to every media outlet on Earth. How do you think that will play out for you?" Vortis paled, realizing the gravity of the threat. "Fine, but this stays between us." Hours later, Griffin sat hunched over a stack of files, his eyes scanning the pages intently. What he found chilled him to the bone. The True Vox had been secretly funneling funds and weapons to Voxari extremist cells, with the express purpose of staging attacks on human targets. They wanted a war. Griffin's mind raced as the pieces fell into place. Timmy's death wasn't an accident. It was the opening move in a much larger, more nefarious game. He slammed his fist on the table, the files scattering. He needed answers, and he knew just where to start. Griffin barged into the holding cell where the Voxari guard who killed Timmy was being detained. The guard looked up, startled. "I already told you it was an accident," he pleaded. Griffin grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the wall. "Cut the crap. I know about the True Vox. Start talking." The guard's eyes widened in fear. I don't know what you're talking about." Griffin pressed his forearm against the guard's throat. "Don't lie to me. Who gave you the order?" The guard struggled, gasping for air. "Please, I can't." Griffin applied more pressure. "Tell me." Okay, the guard choked out. It was Commander Zaxxas. He's high up in the True Vox. He told me to do it, said it was necessary to drive the humans away." Griffin released his grip, letting the guard slump to the floor. His mind reeled with this new information. He needed to act fast. Griffin burst into the Voxari High Council chamber, interrupting a session in progress. "We need to talk, now," he barked. "I have evidence of a conspiracy within your government. The True Vox are trying to start a war with humanity, and Timmy's death was just the beginning." The council chamber erupted into pandemonium as Griffin laid out the damning evidence of the True Vox conspiracy. Shouts of disbelief and outrage echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Vortis slammed his fist on the podium, his voice rising above the din. "Order! We will have order!" Suddenly the chamber doors burst open, and a dozen heavily armed Voxari militants stormed in, their weapons trained on the councillors. "Nobody move!" the lead militant barked. "The True Vox demands this council's immediate surrender!" Griffin reached for his sidearm, but froze as the militant's laser sights danced across his chest. The leader of the militants strode forward, his face twisted into a sneer. "Cease all cooperation with the humans at once, and declare war on Earth, or face the consequences." Vortis drew himself up to his full height, his eyes flashing with defiance. "The Voxari will never bow to terrorists. We will not be dictated to by—" The True Vox leader cut him off with a harsh laugh. He held up a small device, his thumb hovering over a red button. "I have bombs planted across the capital. Comply, or I turn this city into rubble." Griffin's mind raced, calculating his options. His gaze locked onto the detonator. In a flash he lunged at the leader, tackling him to the ground. They grappled for control of the device, rolling across the floor in a desperate struggle. A stray shot rang out, the laser blast sizzling past Griffin's ear. He heard Vortis cry out in pain. With a final wrenching effort, Griffin pried the detonator from the leader's grasp and slammed his elbow into the militant's face, knocking him unconscious. Council security forces swarmed the chamber, quickly overpowering the remaining True Vox operatives. But Griffin's attention was focused solely on Vortis, who lay crumpled on the floor, a smoking hole in his chest. Griffin knelt beside the fallen Chancellor, pressing his hands against the wound to stem the bleeding. Vortis grabbed Griffin's wrist with surprising strength, his breath coming in ragged gasps. You must not let this destroy the peace, Vortis wheezed, his lifeblood seeping between Griffin's fingers. Honor the boy, build a future of cooperation. Griffin nodded, his vision blurring with unshed tears. I will, I swear it. Vortis's grip loosened, his hand falling away as the light faded from his eyes. Griffin bowed his head, grief and rage warring within him. Timmy's death had been avenged, but at what cost? In the chaotic days following the bloody confrontation in the council chamber, Griffin found himself unexpectedly thrust into the role of humanity's de facto ambassador. With Vortis dead and the Voxari government in disarray, it fell to Griffin to chart a path forward for the two species. But even as he wrestled with the burden of his new responsibilities, Griffin couldn't shake the nagging sense that he was still missing pieces of the puzzle. Late one night, as he pored over intelligence reports in his dimly lit office, his computer pinged with an incoming message from an unknown sender. Frowning, Griffin opened the message. It was short and cryptic, claiming to have information about his son's death. The sender instructed Griffin to come alone to a seedy dive bar in the underbelly of the Voxari capital. Against his better judgment, Griffin found himself drawn to the promise of answers. He slipped out of the embassy under cover of darkness, his hand resting on the reassuring weight of his sidearm as he navigated the neon-soaked alleys. The bar was a dingy hole in the wall, filled with a motley assortment of Voxari lowlifes. Griffin scanned the room, his eyes settling on a hooded figure lurking in a shadowy corner booth. Cautiously, he slid into the seat across from the stranger. You have information for me?" Griffin growled. The figure leaned forward, lowering his hood to reveal a grizzled Voxari male. "I am Zaxxus, former True Vox operative, and yes, I know things you need to hear." Griffin's eyes narrowed. "I'm listening." Zaxxus glanced around nervously before speaking in a low, urgent tone. "The True Vox's plan goes beyond simply driving a wedge between our species. They're working with a cabal of human extremists, warmongers who stand to profit from the chaos." Griffin's blood ran cold. "Who are these extremists?" "Powerful people. In your government, your military, your corporations?" Zaxxus leaned in closer. "But that's not the worst of it. Your son, his death was no accident." Griffin's fist clenched, his knuckles white. "Choose your next words carefully." "The Cabal, they developed a bioweapon, targeted and deployed it against your boy. A cruel ploy to push you into an anti-Voxari stance." A white-hot rage surged through Griffin's veins. He lunged across the table, seizing Zaxxus by the collar. "You're lying!" "I have proof," Zaxxus gasped, scrabbling at Griffin's iron grip. "Records on a data drive." Griffin released Zaxxus with a shove, sending him tumbling from the booth. "Show me, now." Zaxxus fumbled in his pocket, producing a small drive with a trembling hand. But as Griffin reached for it, a sudden commotion erupted. A group of armed thugs burst into the bar, weapons drawn. "Zaxxus, you traitorous scum!" Laser fire erupted, patrons screaming and diving for cover. Griffin upended the table, crouching behind it as shots sizzled overhead. He risked a glance at Zaxxus, who lay crumpled on the floor, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Griffin Army crawled through the chaos, stretching his fingers toward the fallen data drive. Zaxxus weakly grabbed his wrist, pressing the drive into his palm. "Take it," Zaxxus gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. "Expose them." Zaxxus shuddered, then went limp, his glassy eyes staring at nothing. Griffin clutched the drive tight, jaw set as he drew his weapon and prepared to fight his way out through the hail of laser fire. The information on that drive could change everything, if he could survive long enough to use it. Griffin clutched the data drive tight in his fist as he boarded the first shuttle back to Earth, his mind reeling from Zaxxus's devastating revelations. His son's death, a bioweapon attack orchestrated by a shadowy cabal to manipulate him. It was almost too much to process, but with each passing moment his shock crystallized into a hardened resolve. He would expose this conspiracy and bring those responsible to justice, no matter the cost. Back on Earth, Griffin immediately set to work, poring over the contents of the data drive late into the night. Names, dates, locations, a tangled web of corruption that seemed to extend into every corner of human society. As he dug deeper, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. His instincts proved correct when, just days into his investigation, a bullet shattered his apartment window, missing his head by mere inches. Griffin dove for cover, his heart pounding in his chest. The Cabal, it seemed, would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. Undeterred, Griffin reached out to his network of contacts, calling in every favor he'd accumulated over his long career in diplomacy. Finally, he secured a clandestine meeting with Marcus Steele, a legendary figure in Earth's intelligence community. They met in a dimly lit bar, Steele's craggy face etched with skepticism as Griffin laid out the evidence. But as he reviewed the contents of the data drive, Steele's eyes widened, his mouth set in a grim line. "This goes deeper than either of us could have imagined," Steele muttered, his voice low and urgent. "If even half of this is true, we're looking at a rot that extends to the very core of both our governments." Together, they began the painstaking work of unraveling the conspiracy, tracing financial flows and communication records, mapping out a network of corruption that spanned both Earth and the Voxari homeworld. The deeper they dug, the more disturbing the picture became. High-ranking officials in both governments, titans of industry, even members of Griffin's own diplomatic corps, all seemingly complicit in a plot to drive their two species to war for their own gain. But it was the final piece of the puzzle that shook Griffin to his core, a grainy surveillance image pulled from the depths of the data drive. The true Vox leader, his face contorted with rage as he confronted the Voxari Council, but as Griffin studied the image closer, he realized with a sickening certainty this was no Voxari. The facial structure, the eyes, this was a human, surgically altered to appear alien. The implications were staggering. The attack on the Council, Timmy's death, the bioweapon strike on Griffin's own son, all part of a meticulously orchestrated plan set in motion by human hands. As the truth spread like wildfire through the halls of power on both worlds, the very foundations of human-Voxari relations began to crack. Governments teetered on the brink of collapse, populations clamored for blood. And at the center of the storm, Griffin and Steele raced against time, desperately trying to head off the Cabal's endgame, a series of staged attacks on both species, designed to push them over the brink into total war. The future of two civilizations hung in the balance as Griffin prepared to confront the Cabal's leadership directly, all too aware that the next few hours would decide the fate of billions. Griffin strode into the conference room, his shoulders squared and jaw set. The assembled leaders of Earth's most powerful nations looked up as he entered, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Steele followed close behind, a stack of data drives clutched in his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," Griffin began, his voice steady and clear, "we have uncovered evidence of a vast conspiracy that threatens the very fabric of our society and our relationship with the Voxari. A cabal of extremists, both human and Voxari, have been working in the shadows to orchestrate a war between our species." He nodded to Steele, who stepped forward and began distributing the data drives. "The information we've gathered implicates high-ranking members of both our governments, as well as powerful corporate interests. They've been funneling resources and weaponry to the True Vox, manipulating events to drive us towards conflict." A murmur rippled through the room as the leaders began to review the evidence. Some looked shocked, others skeptical. A stern-faced general leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Even if this is true," he growled, "why should we cooperate with the Voxari? This could be our chance to assert our dominance, to show them that humanity will not be trifled with." Griffin slammed his fist on the table, his eyes blazing. "Are you insane? This isn't about dominance, it's about survival. If we go to war with the Voxari, billions will die on both sides. Is that what you want?" The general stood, his face reddening. I want what's best for Earth. The Voxari have been a thorn in our side for too long. It's time we put them in their place. Other voices joined in, some echoing the general sentiments, others arguing for caution and diplomacy. The debate grew heated, voices rising to a fever pitch. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the building. The walls shuddered, and the lights flickered as debris rained down from the ceiling. The leaders scrambled for cover, shouts of alarm and confusion filling the air. Griffin staggered to his feet, his ears ringing. He looked around wildly, assessing the damage. Several of the leaders lay unmoving, blood pooling beneath them. Others were struggling to stand, their faces etched with shock and fear. His communicator buzzed urgently. Griffin fumbled for it, his hands shaking. "Griffin here," he barked. The voice on the other end was panicked, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Ambassador, it's Zoran, your Voxari counterpart. There have been attacks here as well, the Cabal. They've launched their endgame. We need to act now, before it's too late." Griffin's blood ran cold. He looked to Steele, who nodded grimly. They both knew what had to be done. "We need a ship," Griffin said, his voice tight with urgency, "and a crew we can trust. We're going to the Voxari homeworld. We're going to stop this, whatever it takes." They raced through the chaos-strewn corridors, dodging fallen debris and panicked officials. The docking bay was in an uproar, ships preparing for launch as crews scrambled to assess the situation. Griffin spotted a sleek, heavily armed warship, its ramp lowered invitingly. He glanced at Steele, who grinned wolfishly. "Always wanted to fly one of these babies," Steele quipped, striding towards the ship. They were met at the ramp by a young officer, his face pale and uncertain. "Sir, I can't let you take this ship without proper authorization." Griffin fixed him with a steely glare. "Son, in about 5 minutes, proper authorization isn't going to mean a damn thing. The fate of 2 species hangs in the balance. Now stand aside." The officer hesitated, then stepped back, clearly cowed by Griffin's intensity. They boarded the ship, Steele sliding into the pilot's seat with a whoop of exhilaration. As they rocketed away from Earth, the devastation of the attacks became clear. Plumes of smoke rose from the planet's surface, the glittering web of cities and infrastructure marred by ugly blackened scars. And in the distance, the unmistakable shapes of Voxari warships loomed, their weapons primed and ready. The comm crackled with angry voices, human and Voxari alike, each accusing the other of betrayal and aggression. Griffin and Steele exchanged a look of grim determination. They were in for the fight of their lives, with enemies on all sides, but they had no choice. The fate of billions depended on them. The ship shuddered as a warning shot sizzled past the hull. Griffin gripped the arms of his seat, his knuckles white. The Rubicon had been crossed. There was no turning back now. As Griffin and Steele hurtled through the Voxari system, the once peaceful void of space had erupted into a maelstrom of destruction. Voxari loyalist and true Vox ships tore into each other with vicious abandon, laser cannons and missiles filling the void with deadly light. Griffin wrenched the ship into a dizzying spiral, narrowly avoiding a barrage of incoming fire. "We need to get through this chaos and find Roth," he shouted over the din of straining engines. Suddenly their comm system crackled to life. "Ambassador Griffin, this is Interim High Chancellor Zora. I have critical information for you." Griffin shared a surprised glance with Steele before responding. "Chancellor Zora, we thought the Voxari government was in disarray after Vortis." "There's no time," Zora cut in brusquely. "We've identified the human leader of the Cabal. His name is Victor Roth, a powerful industrialist who's been manipulating both our peoples to his own ends." Steele swore under his breath. "Roth? That slimy bastard has his fingers in every pie from here to the outer colonies." Zora continued, her voice urgent. "Our intelligence indicates he's holed up on a remote moon, coordinating the final stages of the Cabal's plan. I'm sending you the coordinates now." Griffin punched the data into the nav system, his jaw set with determination. "We're on our way, and Chancellor, thank you." As they approached Roth's hidden base, A swarm of sleek, deadly-looking fighter drones descended upon their ship like angry hornets. "Evasive maneuvers," Steele yelled, the ship bucking and weaving as the drones rained down laser fire. Griffin lunged for the weapons controls, his fingers flying over the console. With a primal yell, he unleashed a volley of missiles, the explosions blossoming in the void like hellish flowers. One by one, the drones winked out of existence, but not before a lucky shot breached their hull. Alarms shrieked as the ship shuddered and lurched, atmosphere venting into space. "We're hit!" Steele grunted, fighting to keep the ship under control. Griffin, his face grim, pointed to the rapidly approaching moon. "We're not going to make it. Brace for impact." The ship hit the moon's surface in a bone-jarring crash, metal shrieking as it tore and crumpled. Griffin and Steele stumbled from the smoking wreckage, battered but alive. Before them loomed Roth's base, a monolithic structure bristling with defenses. They shared a wordless nod and set off, weapons drawn. As they infiltrated the base, they were met with a hail of weapons fire. Roth's mercenaries, heavily armed and highly trained, swarmed from every corridor. Griffin and Steele fought their way through in a brutal, close-quarters battle, the air thick with the stench of blood and cordite. But even as they cut down the mercenaries, a new threat emerged. Towering super soldiers, their bodies grotesquely enhanced with cybernetics and genetic modifications, lumbered forth. They shrugged off bullets and laser blasts, their own attacks devastatingly powerful. Griffin grappled with one of the monstrosities, his muscles screaming as he strained against its inhuman strength. With a desperate cry, he jammed his pistol under its chin and pulled the trigger, the back of its skull exploding in a shower of gore. Panting, covered in blood both human and Voxari, Griffin and Steele finally breached the heart of the base, and there, waiting for them with a cold smile, stood Victor Roth. "Congratulations, gentlemen," Roth said, clapping slowly. "You've fought valiantly to make it this far, but I'm afraid you're too late." He gestured to a massive view screen showing the human and Voxari homeworlds, serene and vulnerable in the void. "As we speak, my agents are preparing to detonate a series of quantum singularity bombs on both our worlds. The resulting destruction will wipe the slate clean, allowing me to reshape our societies as I see fit." Griffin, his voice shaking with rage, leveled his gun at Roth's head. "You're insane. We won't let you get away with this." Roth merely laughed, the sound cold and hollow. "Oh, but I already have. The wheels are in motion, the die is cast, all that remains now is to watch it all burn." Griffin roared as he launched himself at Roth, his fists pummeling the industrialist's face in a relentless barrage. But Roth only laughed, his cybernetically enhanced body absorbing the blows with ease. "Is that all you've got, Griffin?" Roth sneered, his bloodied teeth flashing in a grotesque smile. "I expected more from the man who thought he could stand against me." With a casual backhand, Roth sent Griffin flying across the room, his body smashing into a bank of computer monitors. Sparks and glass rained down on him as he struggled to his feet. Steele charged forward, his own weapon blazing as he tried to draw Roth's attention. But Roth's elite guard intercepted him, their enhanced reflexes and armor making them more than a match for the human soldier. Griffin watched in horror as Steele was driven back, his ammunition depleted and his body battered. Roth strode forward, his hand morphing into a gleaming blade. "Your friend dies first, Griffin," Roth snarled, "and then I'll take my time with you." Steele met Griffin's eyes, a look of grim determination on his face. With a final defiant yell, he leapt at Roth, sacrificing himself to buy Griffin a precious few seconds. Roth's blade punched through Steele's chest, the sickening crunch of bone and the wet squelch of torn flesh filling the air. Steele's eyes widened in shock, his mouth opening in a silent scream. "Finish it," Steele gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. "Stop him no matter what it takes." As Steele's body slid off the blade and crumpled to the floor, Griffin felt a wave of grief and rage consume him. With a primal scream, he launched himself at Roth once more, his attacks fueled by a desperate fury. But even with his newfound resolve, Griffin found himself outmatched. Roth's cybernetic enhancements made him faster, stronger, and more resilient than any human could hope to be. Just as Roth was about to deliver the killing blow, Griffin spotted an opening. Feinting to the left, he ducked under Roth's strike and managed to disarm him, sending his weapon skittering across the floor. Griffin pressed his advantage, driving Roth back with a relentless series of blows. But just as victory seemed within reach, Roth laughed, a cold, cruel sound that chilled Griffin to the bone. "Are you fool?" Roth spat. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" He tapped a small device embedded in his chest. "My heartbeat is linked to a dead man's switch. If it stops, the doomsday devices will detonate. Kill me, and you'll doom both our worlds." Roth smiled, a twisted, triumphant expression. "But if you let me live, I'll rule over the ashes. The choice is yours, Griffin. Murder me and be a genocidal butcher like me, or kneel and accept your place under my boot." Griffin felt despair wash over him as the enormity of the choice sank in. No matter what he did, billions would die. There was no way to win. But then, in a moment of startling clarity, Griffin saw a third path, a way to break the cycle of violence and destruction. He lowered his weapon, staring at Roth intently. "Tell me something, Roth. How does it feel to know that your own arrogance will be your downfall?" Roth frowned, confused by the sudden shift in Griffin's demeanor. "What are you talking about?" Griffin smiled, a small secret expression. "Did you really think I came here without a plan? That I would confront you without an ace up my sleeve?" He tapped his own chest, mirroring Roth's gesture. "While we've been talking, every word you've said has been broadcast to the leadership of both our worlds. They've heard your confession, your sick, twisted rationale for genocide." Roth's eyes widened in shock and fear as he realized the implications. He lunged for his weapon, but Griffin was faster, kicking it away and pressing his advantage. "It's over, Roth," Griffin said, his voice cold and hard. "You've lost, even if you kill me, even if you set off those bombs. The truth is out there. Our people will know the real enemy, and they will unite against you." Roth's face contorted with rage and disbelief as he watched his carefully constructed plans unravel before his eyes. On the viewscreens, human and Voxari ships ceased their deadly dance, turning their weapons instead on the Cabal's forces. "No!" Roth screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "I will not be denied my rightful place as ruler." His eyes wild and desperate, Roth lunged for the control panel, his fingers frantically typing in a series of commands. Alarms blared and red lights flashed as the base's self-destruct sequence initiated. Griffin, battered but unbroken, staggered to his feet. "What have you done, Roth?" Roth spun to face him, his face twisted into a manic grin. "If I can't have my empire, then no one will. We'll all burn together." Explosions rocked the base, walls crumbling and support beams groaning as the structure began to collapse. Griffin and Roth clashed amidst the rubble, trading blows with brutal savagery. Griffin ducked under a wild swing, driving his fist into Roth's gut. Roth doubled over, then lashed out with a cybernetically enhanced kick that sent Griffin crashing through a bank of computers. Sparks and smoke filled the air as Griffin pulled himself from the wreckage, his eyes locking onto the reactor core at the heart of the base. A desperate plan formed in his mind. With a roar of defiance, Griffin charged at Roth, tackling him with bone-crushing force. They tumbled together, smashing through a weakened wall and plummeting into the reactor chamber. The heat was intense, searing Griffin's skin and singeing his hair, but he held on to Roth with grim determination, grappling with the madman as they fell towards the pulsing reactor core. Roth lashed out with his cybernetic enhancements, his blows cracking Griffin's ribs and splitting his skin. But Griffin fought through the pain, his focus narrowed to a single desperate goal. As they neared the seething heart of the reactor, Griffin spotted an access panel on Roth's cybernetic arm. With a final wrenching effort, he tore the panel open, his fingers plunging into the tangled circuitry beneath. Roth's eyes widened in shock and fear. "What are you doing?" "Ending this," Griffin growled, "once and for all." His fingers danced across the wires and circuits, seeking the dead man's switch that held the fate of billions in its grasp. Roth struggled against him, but Griffin held tight, ignoring the searing pain of the reactor's heat. With a final triumphant cry, Griffin found the switch and deactivated it. The doomsday countdown halted, the devices powering down with a whir of fading energy. But there was no time to celebrate. The reactor, pushed beyond its limits, was going critical. Alarms shrieked and containment fields wavered as the core pulsed with an ominous building light. Griffin looked into Roth's eyes, seeing the fear and desperation mirrored there. In that moment, he made his choice. With a final wrenching effort, Griffin wrapped his arms around Roth, holding the struggling madman tight. He closed his eyes, thinking of his son, of Steel, of all those who had sacrificed for the sake of peace. "This is for them," he whispered, as the reactor reached critical mass. "For a better tomorrow." The world went white, then faded into a searing, all-consuming blackness. When the light faded, the base was gone, vaporized in the nuclear fire of the reactor's meltdown. On the ships above, humans and Voxari alike watched in stunned silence as the tide of battle turned, the Cabal's forces surrendering en masse as news of Roth's treachery spread. In the aftermath, as the fires cooled and the smoke cleared, a fragile peace took root. Born of shared loss and tempered by the sacrifices of heroes, it was a peace that would be tested and strained in the years to come. But always, the memory of those who had given their lives for its sake would endure. Griffin, Steel, Vortis, their names would be spoken with reverence and gratitude, their deeds etched into the annals of history. And though the scars of the conflict would linger long and deep, the people of Earth and the Voxari would move forward together, united by the bonds of compassion and the indomitable spirit of those who had dared to dream of a better future. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.